Hello everyone and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Steffy Forrester Finnegan gazed at the amber liquid in her glass. The ice had long since melted and the whiskey had diluted to the point where it was still burning but no longer numbing. At this hour, the CEO office at Forrester Creations was silent, with a distant sound of traffic on the boulevard and the low tick of the wall clock taking the place of the typical hum of designers and assistants. Hours before, she had kicked off her heels. She was curled up in the leather chair that typically belonged to her father, her bare feet resting on the cool marble floor. With his own glass almost drained, Carter Walton stood by the window. Through the window, the city lights seemed blurry. Like a stone, Daphne's ring rested in his pocket. The note was brief and final, and she had placed it on the nightstand before boarding the plane to Paris. Even after reading it 3 times, he could still feel the words grazing his chest. Steffy had discovered him in this state when she entered, still dressed as she had left Monaco. Her eyes rimmed in crimson and her hair knotted from the travel. She didn't intend to visit this place. Her plan was to return home, close the door, and go to sleep until the pain in her chest subsided. Rather, Carter was the only person still inside the building that her feet had taken her to, which always seemed to be the safest place on earth. At first, they hadn't said anything. He had already opened the bottle, and she had poured herself a drink. Without asking, he had given her a second glass. There was no uneasy silence between them. It was the type that settles disputes between individuals who were both devastated on the same evening. At last, Steffy remarked in a raspy voice. She sat next to him the entire flight. Sheila. He was aware. I was not informed by him. Carter moved away from the window. And when I found out, he still tried to tell me she had changed. I apologize. I threw the ring at him. She chuckled briefly. Like a theatrical character in a soap opera. We're done, I told him. Carter approached and took a seat on the edge of the desk. Then I got on a commercial flight and drank until the sky went dark. Daphne didn't even engage in combat. She simply walked away. Stated that she required room. Keep your distance from me. Due to the pressure. Steffy glanced at him. From the notion that I would continue to hope for a baby she can't carry. There was no longer the usual polished lawyer. His shirt sleeves were pulled up, his tie was loose, and the lines surrounding his eyes were more pronounced than she could recall. She briefly glimpsed the guy who had previously stood in this office defending Hope, the firm and himself, but who now appeared to be as confused as she was. She declared, "We're a mess." Yeah. She stumbled to her feet and moved to the window next to him. Below, the city shone. Finn was still in Monaco somewhere, or perhaps he was already on a plane, attempting to get in touch with her. She had turned off her phone. Tonight she wasn't going to turn it on. Carter touched her shoulder. When neither of them moved away, the light contact, which was initially accidental, became intentional. Everything's edges had been softened by the alcohol. The rage that had consumed her on the plane had cooled and turned into a hollow, ravenous feeling. She needed to experience something other than the vivid recollection of Finn standing up for the woman who had once shot them both. She said, "I don't want to be alone." Carter's hand settled on the small of her back. "Neither do I." The kiss began slowly, almost hesitantly, as though they were each waiting for the other to draw away and realize who they were meant to be. Steffy's tongue tasted like whiskey. His fingers threaded into her hair as his hand moved up her spine. Forgetting the empty glass on the windowsill, she pressed in closer. Behind them was the desk. Carter lifted her onto it, scattering papers. She rode up in her dress. The gentle metallic sound of his belt coming undone seemed louder than it should have in the quiet office. Neither Finn nor Daphne were mentioned. They didn't say anything. In awkward, desperate movements, clothing slid away. Steffy's back touched the desk's cool surface. Carter's mouth went down her collarbone and down her throat. With her eyes closed, she arched into him, pursuing the heat that dispelled the pain. He penetrated her with a shared breath, a deep sound that was unique to them both at that very instant. It wasn't kind. It wasn't cautious. It was the kind of sex that occurs when two individuals are attempting to outrun their own emotions. Steffy's fingers pierced his shoulders. Carter's hands were so tightly gripping her hips that they left faint imprints. The desk gave a squeak. A phone buzzed against the floor somewhere, but no one paid attention. They moved in unison until the release came, sudden and intense, leaving them both out of breath and acutely conscious of the silence that ensued. They continued to breathe the same air and touch each other's foreheads for a long minute. Then, without turning to face him, Steffy slid off the desk and gathered her clothes. Carter went away to put on his clothes. The alcohol had warmed the air between them, but it chilled more quickly. "This didn't happen," she muttered as she straightened her dress. Carter gave one nod. "It didn't." Without saying anything more, she located her shoes, put them on, and walked out of the office. There was nobody in the hallway. She was transported by elevators to the parking garage, where her automobile had been waiting for days. With her body still buzzing from the recollection of what she had just done, she drove home on autopilot as the city lights streaked by. The following afternoon, Finn showed up. His clothes was wrinkled from the lengthy travel, and he appeared worn out as soon as she opened the Cliff House door. Taylor was with the children. The house seemed too big and too silent. "Steffy." His voice broke. "Please." She moved aside and allowed him in, saying, "Just let me talk." He appeared to be a man who had practiced every word but was still unsure of where to start as he stood in the living room. With her arms folded, she observed him, the slight pain between her legs serving as a personal memory of the previous evening. Finn remarked, "I never meant to keep it from you. Sheila went on the plane with me. As soon as we touched down, I urged her to head home. Assumed she would. When we were comfortable, I was going to tell you everything. I swear." Steffy remained silent. "I am aware that I stood up for her. I am aware of how that sounded. However, I was making an effort to think that individuals could change. That perhaps she is making an effort. Putting that on you was a mistake on my part." He stepped closer, saying, "It's wrong to ask you to carry it. I adore you. Since the day I first met you, I have adored you. I'll go to any lengths. Counseling. Separation from her. Whatever you require. Just don't discard us," he said, holding the ring he had recovered in his open hand. Steffy glanced at it, then at his face. There was genuineness there. The agony was genuine. She nearly told him for a brief moment. The words, Carter, the desk, the office, and how she had needed someone who wasn't him, pressed against her tongue. She didn't say them. Rather, she grasped the ring and flipped the metal between her fingers. "I'll earn it. I'm not sure if I can trust you again. Stay." "I swear," she said, wrapping her palm around the ring and giving a slow nod. Finn let out a breath like a guy who has been submerged for too long. "We'll see." He started to grab her, but stopped himself and waited. Steffy moved to embrace him. Unlike the frenetic heat of the previous night, his embrace was strong and comfortable. As the secret took hold of her, she leaned her cheek on his chest and listened to his heartbeat. For the first time since Monaco, they shared a bed that evening. Finn cautiously gripped her as like she could shatter. Long after his breathing stabilized, Steffy lay awake and gazed at the ceiling. She heard the sound of papers tumbling to the floor, felt the edge of the desk on her back, and saw Carter's face above her each time she closed her eyes. Finn prepared coffee in the morning and chatted about the kids, returning home permanently, and actually leaving Sheila behind this time. Steffy paid attention and gave appropriate nods. When he departed for the hospital, she gave him a kiss. The kiss had the flavor of everyday life, the future they were meant to have. Later that day, she walked past Carter in the corridor at Forrester Creations. For a little moment, their gazes locked. Neither of them grinned. They didn't say anything. The commitment to never name it again and the weight of what they had done were in the air between them. The night she came back, Finn never inquired. He was unaware that she had sought solace elsewhere. In the days that followed, he poured his heart out, pledging distance, change, and that Sheila would never again stand in their way. After listening, Steffy gave him the impression that he was the only one who had broken anything. The peaceful places held the secret. It was present in the way her body occasionally recalled Carter's hands when Finn touched her. It resided in the cautious distance she maintained from the CEO's office after work. It lived with the knowledge that, even if no one else ever saw it, one night of weakness had left a mark that she would never be able to remove. Steffy stood on the Cliff House's balcony and gazed out at the ocean a few weeks later, when Finn finally thought they were making their way back. She had the ring back on her finger. Inside, the kids chuckled. As Finn told Hayes a story, his voice could be heard coming from the kitchen. Everything appeared complete once more. She felt the spot on her hip where Carter's fingertips had applied enough pressure to leave a long faded mark. The mark had vanished. It wasn't the memory. Finn never found out what she had done that evening, so he was shocked. A personal crack in the basis of the life they were reconstructing. The truth remained hidden behind her teeth. And each time he gazed at her with hope in his eyes, Steffy grinned and bore the burden by herself. The strongest person Finn Finnegan has ever known was Steffy Forrester. As he paced the living room of their Cliff House, the same space where they had reared their children, established a life, and made lifelong promises to one another, he reassured himself that, with the same unrelenting power that had been beating inside his chest since Monaco, the ocean outside broke against the rocks. After Steffy disappeared, after she tore the ring off her finger and hurled it at him as if it were poison, he had taken the first flight home. No amount of justification could change the sight of sheer betrayal in her eyes as she gazed at him. That plane had carried Sheila. He was aware. He hadn't said anything. And he had lost everything because of his quiet. He had attempted to contact, sent a text, voicemails that, hour by hour, became more and more frantic. When he eventually arrived at Forrester Creations in search of her, Ridge had almost lost his mind. Finn understood his father-in-law's anger, which had been a physical barrier that cut him to the bone. Ridge's young daughter was named Steffy, and Finn had betrayed her confidence once more over the one individual who had previously come dangerously close to ruining their family twice. The fact that Steffy had already arrived in Los Angeles, turned off her phone, and entered the dimly lit offices of Forrester Creations with a bottle of something potent and a heart that felt like it had been scraped raw was something Finn was unaware of and could not even begin to imagine while he was still in Monaco trying to figure out how to fix the unfixable. There had been Carter Walton, in his own way broken. Daphne had vanished. Paris, like an afterthought, a wedding ring and a one-way ticket were abandoned. Suddenly, two individuals who had been the pillars of support and stability for years were left with nothing to cling to. The edges were blurred by alcohol. Shared suffering took care of the rest. Talking was the first step. Steffy was venting all of her anger and sadness at Sheila and Finn's decision to prioritize blood over their family. Carter was paying close attention because he understood what it was like to watch someone you loved leave. The words became quieter between the second and third drink. The gap between them vanished somewhere after that. A hand on the shoulder turned into a hand on the waist. Comfort turned into something messier, hotter, and more frantic. In the CEO's office, clothing fell off as if they were discarding the ruins of their existence. For a single evening, neither of them considered the repercussions. All they could think of was not being alone. 3 days later, Finn found out the truth. At last, he had located Steffy at the Cliff home. She had been aloof but not totally shut off. She had allowed him to speak. Give him a chance to apologize. Let him promise that Sheila would never again stand in their way. With the abandoned ring extended like an offering, he had knelt down in front of her in the living room and pled with her to give him another chance. Steffy had shed tears. She had given him a look that resembled love once more. She had then uttered the words that would plague him for the remainder of his life. I slept with Carter. The ensuing hush was so profound that it seemed as though the sea had stopped. Finn's hand slowly dropped while still grasping the ring. He gazed at her as though she had spoken in a language he was unfamiliar with. They were rejected by his thoughts. Replay after replay, they remained incomprehensible. Steffy. His Steffy. The lady who had really resurrected his birth mother and battled for their marriage via shootings and lies. The woman who had given birth to his children. The woman who had told him they were done because of Sheila while staring him in the eye in Monaco. And now this. What? The word was hardly audible and came out broken. Steffy did not avert her gaze. Her expression lacked both malice and victory. Just a hollow tiredness that made things worse in some way. The evening I returned. I was intoxicated. We were both a mess and he was. Took place. Just once. Before Finn realized he had moved. His knees touched the ground. It won't happen again. The gentle metallic sound seemed ridiculously loud in the quiet room when the ring slid from his fingers and bounced once on the hardwood. As though he could erase the image from his mind before it was fully formed. He squeezed the heels of his hands into his eyes till he saw stars. Carter and Steffy. In the workplace. Clothes on the ground. Mouths, hands, and the kind of need that arises only after everything else has burned down. You and Carter, he said with a hollow, humorless giggle. Carter Walton. The man who has been like family. The man who got up during our wedding. The man who spent Christmas at our place. You had an affair with him. I was in pain, Steffy said. You had just picked Sheila once more. You lied about taking a plane around the globe with her. I thought the marriage was already over. So you ended it by having an affair. Finn's head jerked up. The destruction in his eyes had become more acute. You hurled your ring toward me. We're done, you told me. And then you went and... He was unable to complete the statement. The words had an acidic taste. Steffy encircled herself with her arms. I'm not pleased with it. I won't pretend that it wasn't an error. This isn't the same and you know it, Finn said, pushing himself to his feet with a shaky gait. But you don't get to stand there and act like you're the only one who has ever made one. Taking off your clothes for another man while our marriage was still legally valid is not the same as keeping a secret about Sheila getting on a plane. The mention of the kids struck like a blow. While our kids were still calling me Dad and asking when Mommy was coming home. For a brief while, Steffy's face wrinkled before she straightened it once more. I am aware. Do you really think I don't know, Finn? Do you really think I haven't been obsessed with it ever since? He gazed at her, looking for some indication that this was a test, a cruel prank, or a nightmare from which he would awaken. None existed. Standing in their living room, the lady he loved above all else confessed that she had given herself to someone else during a painful time that he had contributed to. Whether he wanted them or not, the pictures continued to appear. Carter's hands on Steffy's flesh. Steffy threw back her head. While he was still attempting to catch a trip home, the same body that had carried their children and that he had mapped 1,000 times with his own hands was offered up to someone else in a dimly lit office. He was unable to breathe because anger, despair, and a horrible twisted jealousy were all tangled in his chest. Did you find it enjoyable? Before he could stop it, the question slipped out raw and terrible. Steffy's gaze flickered. Don't. Did you? His voice rose as he stepped closer. Was it satisfactory? Did he cause you to temporarily forget about me? Did you pretend nothing occurred when you got home and looked at our children? Stop it. I can't stop it. Finn's yell reverberated through the lofty rafters. Keep seeing it. Steffy's own fury finally broke. I can't stop thinking about the fact that you were already moving on with the first warm body that showed up with a bottle while I was on my knees in Monaco trying to figure out how to fix us. You can't turn this into me being a callous whore who was eager to cheat. Finn, you broke us. Sheila and you. Once more. The guy I loved beyond all else had once again chosen his violent birth mother over me. So I spent the whole flight home drinking myself to death. Carter was present. He was also in pain. It wasn't a big romance. For several hours, it was just two broken individuals acting foolishly. Finn's breath came quickly and forcefully. And I already hate myself for it enough without you twisting the knife. With his head down, he moved away from her and braced his hands on the back of the couch. Outside, the ocean continued to crash as if nothing had happened. A clock ticked somewhere in the home. Typical noises. Everyday existence. Everything seemed filthy. At last, he said the simple truth-only statement. I would have forgiven the plane. I would have made it up to you for the rest of my life. If it had been necessary, I would have cut Sheila off entirely. However, he shook his head. This is not like the others. This is you handing him something that should have been mine. That was meant to be ours.